Hello, my friends. Have you ever stopped to think that the Bible may have predicted the end of an empire? What if I told you that the world's greatest economic and military power, the USA, could be about to face a terrifying fate? This is not fiction, it is prophecy. The apocalypse, so studied and debated, brings with it a frightening revelation, but also a warning for all of us. The rise of artificial intelligence, global financial control, and the loss of freedom are closer than we imagine. But don't worry, there's no need to panic. Together we will understand how the prophecies already spoke about this moment, and more importantly, how we can prepare for what is to come. The end of an era is closer than you think, and the answer to how we can survive may lie in the ancient pages of the Bible. However, before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, as your subscription is extremely important to us. Now let's go. America's prophesied destiny. What does the Bible really say about end-time nations? There is something almost mystical about the way the scriptures speak about the nations in the last days. The Bible, with its prophetic verses, presents a future of destruction and judgment for world powers, and the question arises, is America a nation that has occupied the center of the world's attention for centuries among them? The apocalypse, with its load of apocalyptic symbols and visions, is, without a doubt, one of the most intriguing books in the Bible, but it is also one of the most ambiguous. Amid terrifying images of disasters, cataclysms, and angels blowing trumpets of judgment, some passages appear that may directly refer to modern powers and empires. As we delve deeper into these texts, we can see that, although the Bible does not directly mention the United States, it describes empires that, in many ways, reflect today's America. A global superpower with an economy that influences most of the planet, an immense army, and a lifestyle that, for many, seems untouchable and unshakable. However, the Bible is clear about the fate of empires that stray from the divine path. When arrogance mixes with corruption, when justice is lost and moral values are exchanged for selfishness, there is a price to be paid. And that price is collapse, an imminent fall that in many cases is described as something sudden and devastating, as if the time of judgment is about to arrive. In the apocalyptic vision, this type of empire, a modern Babylon, will be destroyed in shocking ways, often without the empire itself realizing the danger at its doorstep. The reference to Babylon, for example, is one of the most powerful in the book of Revelation. Babylon, which in antiquity was the center of power and corruption, represents more than a historic city. It symbolizes any nation or empire that, upon achieving greatness, departs from divine principles and enters into moral decay. What we see today, as difficult as it may be to accept, may be a vivid picture of how things could unfold. Is America becoming the new Babylon? A nation that, through its own arrogance, is approaching its catastrophic downfall? These questions are not mere speculation. They emerge when we observe current signs. The growing political divide, social and economic problems, and even the way America is viewed on the world stage suggest that the country may be heading for a period of great trials, perhaps the likes of which we have never seen before. The apocalyptic writings themselves suggest that the sin of the nations will be exacted directly, with consequences as quick as they are devastating. The Bible talks about a fall that happens in 1 hour, an event of such magnitude that everyone who viewed the empire with admiration and respect will be taken by surprise. But the most intriguing thing is that this fall is not just a divine punishment, it also serves as a sign, a signal to other nations. The destruction of Babylon in the apocalyptic vision is not just about the end of an empire, but about the beginning of a new era, where divine judgments will be executed against all systems of oppression, corruption, and sin. How is the USA included in this plan? Has America, by accumulating power and wealth, already exceeded the limit of what can be tolerated? And what does it mean for the world when a nation that has so much global influence succumbs to its own moral fall? The Bible is not limited to describing the end of an empire. She also talks about the transition of power and the new beginning that follows, always with a message of hope for the righteous, but a dire warning for the wicked. And as we look to the future and the structures that dominate the world, we can't help but wonder, what do the signs of America's decline say about the future of humanity as a whole? And is this dark future already beginning to manifest itself in places and moments that few can see? The answers to these questions may be closer than we imagine. The symbolism of Revelation, with its images of destruction and rebirth, of judgments and redemption, brings us to a point where a crucial question emerges. How does this process of fall connect with another great prophetic symbol of the Bible, Babylon? The power and fall of Babylon. Is the USA the new Babylon? Imagine a colossal city, a metropolis of indescribable wealth, where the streets are lined with gold and opulence is the norm, not the exception. This city, in ancient Babylon, was one of the most powerful in the world, with its imposing walls and golden doors, which dazzled anyone who approached. But alongside its brilliance, there was a moral and spiritual decay, a corruption that corroded its foundations, invisible to the eyes of those who, immersed in the lust of power, never imagined that the end was near. The Bible describes the fall of Babylon as a cataclysmic event, as sudden as it was devastating, an event that took everyone by surprise, even the Babylonians themselves. Now let us turn our eyes to the modern world, to a nation that, like ancient Babylon, seems unbeatable, a global superpower that, for centuries, has excelled in politics, economics, and culture. The United States of America. It is not difficult to see the parallels between biblical Babylon and the modern US empire. Just like Babylon, America rose as an empire of great power and wealth, with its doors open to the world, offering freedom, prosperity, and security. But as the nation grew stronger, something began to change, and the same flaws that marked Babylon's decline began to appear. The Bible, in Revelation 18, describes the fall of Babylon as a spectacle of lamentation, a cry of horror from those who once benefited from its wealth. In 1 hour, his great wealth was ruined. These verses resonate in the back of our minds when we look at the United States today, a nation that in some ways seems to be on a dangerous path. What then makes the US resemble Babylon? Could it be his incessant quest for power, wealth, and global control? Or perhaps it is the growing disconnect between the original values that founded it and the practices that prevail today. The symbolism of Babylon in Revelation goes beyond the description of a physical city. She is a symbol of everything a nation can become when it loses its morality and turns away from God. In Revelation 18, we see the fall of Babylon described as an event that not only destroys the city, but also affects the entire world. The lament comes from every corner of the earth, from merchants who lost their riches, from kings who lost their dominion, from navigators who lost their ships. This is the power of Babylon. It affects not just its inhabitants, but everyone around it. What is fascinating and terrifying at the same time is that in many ways this echoes the global position of the United States. The influence of the USA is of such magnitude that an economic, political, or military downfall could have profound and immediate repercussions across the planet. What if, like Babylon, this fall is as sudden and destructive as the prophecies tell us? The most intriguing thing is that the Bible does not describe Babylon as a simple city. She is, in fact, a metaphor for the system of values, practices, and corruptions that she represents. It symbolizes excess, materialism, pride, and arrogance of a civilization that forgets its spiritual principles. America, for decades, has been a predominant force in promoting these same values around the world. Rampant consumerism, the pursuit of limitless power, moral degradation, and the loss of a transcendental view of life. All of these elements echo the flaws of Babylon. The warning we see in the pages of Revelation about Babylon is clear. The fall is inevitable, but it does not come without a warning. There is an opportunity for repentance, a chance to get back on the right path. However, just as Babylon refuses to listen to its prophets and continues its decline, the warning signs for the United States continue to be ignored by many. The pride of America, the feeling of invincibility, the belief that nothing can shake the empire, is the same spirit that infiltrated ancient Babylon before its fall. The question now is, will the United States learn from the history of Babylon, or will it follow in the footsteps of an empire that thought it was eternal? The traces of decadence are everywhere, in the streets, in policies, in attitudes. But the story of Babylon teaches us that the fall of a great power does not happen just because of external attacks. It comes from within, from internal corruption, from the collapse of morality and the loss of connection with the principles that once made it great. And just like Babylon, the great collapse can come in the blink of an eye, transforming a nation of immense strength into a specter of what it once was. But how does this directly connect to the signs we are seeing in the world today? How can we understand this imminent collapse, and is it about to happen? These questions take us directly to a place where the answer may be even more terrifying. The system of global control that is emerging, in part, in the hands of this great power. And what does this system have to do with the arrival of a new leader, the Antichrist? The Antichrist and the global control system, the prophecy taking shape. As the end times approach, a mysterious figure emerges from the shadows of Scripture, the Antichrist. His rise, as prophesied in the Bible, will not just be an isolated event, but the sign of a profound global change, an invisible revolution that will shape the destiny of humanity. The Antichrist, described in several passages of Revelation and in other parts of the Scriptures, will be a charismatic leader, someone capable of seducing the masses, establishing temporary peace, but also a ruthless tyrant. But what do we really know about him? His rise, like so many other parts of the prophecy, will be linked to the emergence of a global control system, an interconnected network that will monitor, control, and subject all of humanity to a single regime. And this is where the terrifying connection between the Antichrist and the current age of technology begins to form. In recent years, the world has witnessed a dizzying increase in the development of technologies that seem relentless, uncontrollable, and invasive. Massive surveillance systems, digital currencies controlled by global entities, and social networks that collect personal data from billions of people. Biblical prophecies talk about a global system that will have the power to control everything and everyone, a system that will mark those who submit with a sign. And what is most disturbing is that this much feared sign seems more possible with each passing day. If the ancient words are true, then we are closer than we realize to a world in which individual freedom will be a distant memory. The prophecy about the Antichrist is not just related to a man, but to a system that will manifest itself through him. This global system will be a fusion of technology, politics, and economics, a world government controlled by an elite who will use modern tools to enslave humanity. The famous mark of the beast, mentioned in Revelation 13, which will be imposed on everyone, without which no one will be able to buy or sell, is the most powerful metaphor for absolute control. Over the years, we have seen the emergence of technologies that connect us more and more to each other, and at the same time, leave us vulnerable to centralized control. The advance of cryptocurrencies, for example, raises questions about financial control, while the implementation of a global government and the use of large-scale data make the scenario increasingly plausible. These signs are no longer just abstract figures, but tangible realities. As in a dystopian science fiction scenario, the world is preparing, without realizing it, for the installation of a totalitarian regime that does not need physical weapons to dominate, but something much more powerful: data. The Internet of Things, 24-hour surveillance, digital currencies that cannot be tracked or manipulated without centralized control. All of these elements are, in essence, paving the way for what biblical prophecies call marks that divide humanity into two groups: those who obey the system and those who oppose it. And as technologies advance and control systems become more sophisticated, the rise of the Antichrist will appear to be an inevitable consequence. He will not come as a monster with red eyes and horns, but as an attractive figure, full of promises of peace and prosperity, disguising his diabolical intentions with a welcoming smile. With the masses blindly following his lead, he will build a system that will be impossible to escape. The real terror begins when the reality that individual freedom is being devoured by a highly efficient but diabolical system begins to take shape. But the Antichrist and his system will not emerge in isolation. They have a precursor, a preparation that began long before their appearance. What we are witnessing now, the increasing surveillance, the centralization of powers, the control of information, are the first steps in a preparation that sets the stage for the rule of the Antichrist. What once seemed unthinkable is now becoming increasingly plausible. And as the Antichrist prepares the ground for his arrival, the entire world will be thrown into a conflict of biblical proportions, a spiritual war between those who surrender to the system and those who refuse to submit to totalitarian control, a fight for control of souls, for freedom, for true faith. And the big question remains: will humanity, before it is too late, be able to realize the true nature of this threat? What can we do to prevent this from happening? This takes us to an even deeper point. What will become of the fate of the souls who choose to resist the system? The mark of the beast, the sign of the end or of submission? Imagine for a moment that you are in the heart of a futuristic metropolis where everything around you seems to be monitored. Every step you take, every purchase you make, even the conversations you have are being recorded, analyzed, and used to determine your destiny. At the center of this relentless surveillance network is something all citizens need to survive: the brand. It is discreet, almost invisible at first glance, but its importance is immeasurable. Without this brand, you cannot buy, sell, travel, or even live in a dignified way. The system, perfect and absolute, demands your loyalty, and the only way to demonstrate it is with this sign. Have you ever heard of the mark of the beast? A mysterious and feared concept that appears in the book of Revelation? In recent centuries, this brand has fueled debates about its meaning. For many, it represents total control over human life, a tool through which the Antichrist will exercise his dominance. For others, it is a metaphor, a symbol of obedience to a corrupt system that goes against freedom and divine principles. But what exactly is this mark, and why is it so crucial in end times prophecy? The Bible describes the mark of the beast in Revelation 13, 16, 17, saying that it will be imposed on all, small and great, rich and poor, free and enslaved, and that no one will be able to buy or sell without it. This is one of the most terrifying aspects of the prophecy, the idea that the entire global economy will be controlled by a system that demands total and absolute adherence, with no room for refusal. The brand, being a requirement for survival in the post-apocalyptic world, will make people forced to make an impossible choice: either surrender to the system or exclusion from society. Humanity will be divided between those who accept this mark and those who resist, with devastating consequences for those who oppose it. But what makes this symbol even more enigmatic is its invisible and apparently immaterial nature. In ancient times, a brand was understood as something physical, a mark that could be visible, perhaps even tattooed or imprinted on the skin. However, as technologies advanced, the idea of a tangible brand was replaced by something more modern, more difficult to detect, and more terrifying. The brand can be digital, electronic, biological. And this is where the scariest theories begin to come to fruition. Today, we are seeing the emergence of technologies that could easily fit into this scenario. Microchips, tracking devices, biometric identification, cryptocurrencies. All of these technologies are quickly becoming part of the fabric of everyday life. In the not-too-distant future, you may be required to carry a chip under your skin to carry out financial transactions or access essential services. These chips could be used to store your personal, financial and health information, creating a seamless way to track each individual's movements. And how does this fit with the mark of the beast? The answer appears to lie in a future where choices and personal freedom are drastically reduced, and the only way to guarantee a relatively comfortable life is through adherence to this global system. If this seems surreal or unattainable, remember that we're just starting to see the first signs of how this brand could take shape. And when we look at the promises of a world without borders, where global governments can control not only what we buy and sell, but how far we can go, the mark of the beast becomes less a metaphor and more an imminent threat. She will be the last piece of the Antichrist's puzzle, who will use fear, control, and manipulation to make everyone accept his authority. The real tragedy of this brand is not just physical control, but spiritual control. The Bible warns that whoever accepts the mark will be submitting to a pact, something that cannot be undone. The act of accepting the mark is symbolically a rejection of God, a choice of alliance with the Antichrist, and as a result, eternal damnation. He who submits to this system will be accepting not only control over his body, but also over his soul. This raises a crucial question. When the time comes, will you be able to resist, or will you succumb to the pressure of a world that demands conformity? When looking at the signs of a global system on the rise, it is easy to see how the pressure to accept the mark of the beast could become irresistible. But will the system be so omnipresent and manipulative that at some point it will be impossible to resist? What happens to those who refuse to accept the mark? What will be your destiny? This is a question that takes us straight to the next stage of this story, where the last confrontation between freedom and tyranny will be fought. And when that moment comes, will it be too late to prevent what is to come? The Great Tribulation, awakening to a world in collapse. Imagine a moment when the sky seems to collapse on you, when the sun, which has always brightened your days, begins to go out, and the stars that used to shine overhead go out one by one. The icy wind of a dark future begins to blow, and the sound of chaos fills the air. In the blink of an eye, you find yourself in the midst of a global meltdown, an apocalyptic event that tears at the fabric of reality and brings out the worst in humanity. This is the scenario that many interpret as the Great Tribulation, the period of intense suffering and global persecution described in biblical prophecies. The question that hangs in the air is, how did we get to this point? And more importantly, how will we survive this? In the Bible, the Great Tribulation is described as the height of human suffering, where the earth will be marked by natural disasters, famine, disease, and relentless oppression. In Revelation 7:14, it talks about a great suffering that no one has ever experienced before. And this period will be characterized by fierce persecution against those who do not submit to the Antichrist's global system. The promises of security and prosperity that were made to anyone who accepted the mark of the beast suddenly become a cruel lie. What once seemed like the key to survival will now be eternal prison, and those who refuse to submit to this regime will find their path filled with unthinkable pain and sacrifice. But most terrifying of all, during the Great Tribulation, humanity will begin to realize the true nature of its error. It will be as if, at the moment the key to a promising future turns, everyone wakes up to a terrifying reality. A system that promised peace and prosperity turned out to be the damnation of their souls. Famine, plague, natural disasters, religious persecution, all of these will become a reflection of a world that has chosen to believe lies rather than follow the truth. For many, the Great Tribulation may seem like a distant story, almost a horror tale with no basis in reality. However, looking at the world today, the pieces begin to fall into place in unsettling ways. The wars that never seem to end, the natural catastrophes that become increasingly frequent and devastating, the growing social and political division in various parts of the world. All of this seems to be a preparation, a warning that we are closer to tribulation than we ever imagined. And as the signs intensify, the true magnitude of the tribulation becomes harder to ignore. But the big question remains, why does humanity need to go through this? What justifies such suffering? The answer, according to the scriptures, lies in the need for purification and redemption. The Great Tribulation is a time of judgment, an opportunity for hearts hardened by arrogance, sin, and indifference to turn to God. It is a time of separation, where those who choose loyalty to the Antichrist will pay the price for their choice, while those who remain faithful to God will be purified by the fires of adversity. The Bible speaks of a procession of martyrs, those who, even in the face of death, refused to deny their faith. They will become witnesses to God's power in a time of global despair. What makes the Great Tribulation even more devastating is that it will not be an isolated event, but a series of events culminating in total despair. As the world moves away from its spiritual values, spiritual decay will be reflected in the physical destruction of the planet. It will not just be a war of weapons, but a war of souls. And it will be in this global chaos that the deepest truths will begin to reveal themselves. The lies that sustained governments, the ideologies that divided nations, the false promises that deceived billions of people. In the end, what will remain will be the final choice between good and evil, between life and death. The great lesson of the Great Tribulation is that, in the end, the masks fall and the true face of the world appears. Those who trusted in human wisdom, fleeting riches, and the promises of the Antichrist will discover the harsh truth. What appeared to be an easy path was, in reality, the path of destruction. And it is at that moment that awakening will be inevitable, but it will be too late. What remains after the tribulation is a question that resonates in the hearts of all who risk understanding the prophecies. Will there, after all, be a place for those who chose resistance, those who even at the height of suffering maintained their faith in God? Will this period of pain be the prelude to a new era, or the end of all things? The end of traditional religions, the rise of new digital faiths, As the world prepares for the arrival of a new global order, a silent but profound change begins to take place in people's minds and hearts. The great traditional religions, those that have guided humanity for millennia, are beginning to lose their power of attraction. What was once a firm faith, supported by ancient doctrines and practices, now faces an invisible but powerful enemy, technology. And in this new scenario, a disturbing question arises. Will traditional religions disappear in the face of the rise of new beliefs, more adapted to the digital world and the information age? The scriptures speak of a new gospel, of a worship that will no longer be centered on temples or religious practices, but that will manifest itself in a new type of faith, a virtual faith, where the boundaries between the real and the imaginary begin to blur. What we are witnessing is not just a transformation in the religious field, but the birth of a new type of spirituality, powered by algorithms and artificial intelligence. The new digital religions are based on principles that seem harmless at first glance. The search for universal truth, for personal fulfillment, and for spiritual connection between individuals. However, as these new faiths begin to spread, they reveal a dark face. They are religions that promise absolute control over the lives of their followers, which seek to manipulate not only faith, but people's most intimate thoughts and desires. And all of this, of course, is orchestrated by a system that never sleeps, never fails, always adapting to those who give in to it. With the advancement of social networks, artificial intelligence, and digital surveillance, a new form of faith emerges. People begin to seek meaning and purpose in digital interactions, in the videos they watch, in the online communities they participate in. Digital influencers, virtual masters, and technology gurus are beginning to occupy the space that was previously reserved for priests, pastors, and spiritual leaders. And the promise is tempting. Instead of a transcendent, distant, and inaccessible God, what these new religions offer is an immediate deity, connected directly to the digital world, who knows everything about you, and in return, promises to give you everything you want. But the price of this spiritual connection is your own freedom. Faith is now no longer something you freely choose, but something that is offered in exchange for your loyalty to a system of control. As people become increasingly dependent on technology to meet their emotional and spiritual needs, they begin to lose touch with reality, becoming prisoners of their own digital creations. In the end, they are no longer seeking the truth, but giving themselves over to an illusion that makes them believe that they are closer to something greater, when in reality, they are moving further and further away from the Creator. The great irony of this new digital religion is that, despite offering a promise of freedom and connection, it is actually imprisoning souls in a virtual cage. And even worse, it is preparing the ground for the rise of a totalitarian faith, where followers, by surrendering to its algorithms, will become completely controlled not just physically but spiritually. The words of Jesus, which warn us against false teachers and false prophets, echo once again. The idea that, in the last days, humanity would be deceived by a false gospel is no longer a distant religious fantasy, but a tangible reality that emerges every day on the technological horizon. And as digital religions grow stronger, the ancient Christian faith, which is based on love, truth, and freedom, begins to find itself increasingly isolated and persecuted. The world is moving away from its spiritual roots in search of something more immediate, more comfortable, more controllable. And as the masses surrender to this new digital spirituality, Scripture warns of the price of ignoring true faith. For when the Antichrist arrives, it will not just be a political government that will rise, but a spiritual system that will kidnap souls, promising them a false and temporary salvation. The rise of digital religions, like all false religions, may seem harmless at first, but it will soon become clear that their true intention is to turn hearts away from the true faith, leading people to accept a totalitarian system that masquerades as liberating. And as this happens, the world moves ever closer to a dystopian future, where religious freedom is just a distant memory and true faith struggles to survive. The story has just begun, and what follows is a path of darkness and challenge, where the choices made now will determine the fate of millions. But will there still be time to return to the true path at the end of it all? Mind control, the rise of global psychological manipulation. In a world where technology is becoming ubiquitous, human minds are beginning to be treated as new territory to be conquered. It is no longer enough to control people's physical actions. The real power now lies in shaping your thoughts, your fears, and your innermost desires. Imagine, then, a future where you can no longer trust your own opinions, where your choices are no longer yours but programmed. What happens when a system can not only monitor, but also manipulate what you feel, what you think, and even what you believe to be your reality? This is the world of mind control, emerging as technology and psychology intertwine, creating a new kind of tyranny that is invisible but more dangerous than any yet experienced. In recent years, we have witnessed a dizzying increase in the capabilities of machines to learn about us. Algorithms that know our behaviors before we are even aware of them. Artificial intelligence programs that can predict our actions and influence our decisions. Now imagine a future where that power extends even further, where governments and corporations not only watch us but also control how we think. Psychological manipulation, something that was once the domain of conspiracy theories, has now become a tool of mass control, perfectly camouflaged under the facade of ease of living and convenience. This control goes beyond simple data collection. It involves the sophisticated use of psychological tactics to influence people's decisions at much deeper levels. Advertising campaigns are no longer about products, but about shaping your worldview, your values, and even your morality. Politics, in turn, stops being a choice between opposing ideas and becomes a matter of manipulating emotions. Anger, fear, euphoria, all of these emotions become tools in the global power game. The Antichrist, in his rise, uses exactly these tactics to ensure that everyone submits to the system he created, convincing the population that their survival depends on their unconditional loyalty. But mind control is not just a matter of external persuasion. As technology advances, it begins to infiltrate the human brain directly. Brain-computer interfaces, chips that change the way we think and feel, devices that modify mood and perception, all of this is starting to become reality. With a simple implant, it would be possible to change the way a person reacts to an idea or event, or even change their most basic desires. Those who accept this technology, under the illusion that they are improving their lives, do not realize that they are giving up control over their own mind. Free will, that fundamental right of humanity, is gradually replaced by the convenience of a system that knows exactly what is best for you. This is the treacherous path humanity is taking. At first, it seems like a solution to modern problems, devices that make life easier, systems that help us make better decisions, a more efficient society. But deep down lies the seed of the most perfect totalitarianism that has ever existed. It is not a regime of physical oppression, but mental oppression. Control does not come through prisons or battalions of soldiers, but through subtle, almost invisible influences that guide minds where the system wants them to go. You start to think you are making decisions, but the truth is that the choices have already been made by others before you even raise an eyebrow. And as this psychological manipulation spreads, a deeper question arises. Will humanity be able to resist? Or will, after a certain point, everyone become so immersed in this system that they no longer know what is truly theirs? Biblical prophecies warn of this type of deception, speaking of a period in which the masses will be deceived and manipulated to the point of no longer recognizing the truth. The Antichrist, with his technological and psychological power, will be able to dominate the minds of millions, causing them to blindly follow his orders without question. And for those who try to resist, the response will be relentless. In this new world of mind control, free will is not just a distant memory. It is practically impossible. Fear is the key. The manipulation of human anxiety is the gateway. And as tensions rise, people begin to seek refuge in the system's promises, trusting in a leader who always seems to know what's best for them. But the price of this surrender will be the loss of identity, freedom, and, most devastating of all, true humanity. And now, with mind control already underway, one question remains unanswered. How far are we willing to go to maintain our autonomy? The journey that follows is dark, full of difficult choices, where what is at stake is not just our physical survival, but the very essence of what it means to be free. And as control tightens, the only question that resonates in our hearts is, how far are you willing to surrender? Digital currency and the global control system, the end of financial freedom. Imagine a future where you no longer need to carry cash, where transactions happen in seconds with just a tap on your cell phone. It would seem like a great convenience, wouldn't it? But as technology advances, the shadows that hang over this seemingly perfect system also become clearer. Digital currency, this invention that promises to revolutionize the way we deal with the economy, hides in its essence something much more sinister: the end of financial freedom. What once seemed like an inevitable advance now reveals itself as a master key that opens the doors to total control, where every penny spent, every transaction made, is monitored and regulated by an invisible and absolute power. Today, the idea of a centralized digital currency controlled by governments or financial institutions is becoming more concrete. Money that was once physical, tangible, and to some extent personal is now in digital hands, in the clouds, and under the control of centralized systems that know exactly where you spend it and how you spend it. Digital currencies, like Bitcoin, may have been an attempt at decentralization, but what is preparing for the future is exactly the opposite. The Antichrist, as described in Scripture, may not come with an army of soldiers, but with an army of algorithms that command the world's financial flows. Its true strength lies in controlling something that, for centuries, has been considered a symbol of freedom: money. In this new system, digital currency will be more than a simple form of payment. It will be the key that determines who can participate in society and who will be excluded. Imagine that if one day you are considered an enemy of the system through your religion, your political choices, or even your resistance to totalitarian control, your access to money will be cut off. Without access to financial resources, you will be unable to buy food, pay for essential services, or even have a home. The freedom that digital currency promises hides an even greater danger. Financial freedom will be something that will be in the hands of an elite that will determine who deserves and who does not deserve the chance to survive. But the most terrifying thing is that in a digital system, there is no longer anonymity. Every transaction, every purchase, every financial movement will be recorded in a centralized database. What was once a simple cash payment now becomes a tracked, analyzed, controlled transaction. People will no longer have the privacy to decide where they spend their money, how they spend it, or whether they simply don't spend it. Financial control will become an extension of social control. What you buy, what you consume, and where you travel will be monitored and regulated. It will no longer be a matter of personal choice, but a matter of compliance with the system. The simple act of living independently will be a constant struggle against a system that demands total adherence. As this system spreads, decentralized cryptocurrencies, which were once seen as a form of resistance, could be crushed. Governments and financial institutions have the power to make any alternative that does not fit their agenda disappear. The creation of a centralized digital currency is not just a matter of convenience, but a tool of massive control, a way of ensuring that every aspect of human life, every transaction, every economic movement, is part of a network monitored and controlled by a centralized power. It's not just money that's being manipulated, it's freedom of choice, it's the right to be free. And as this new financial order takes hold, the true nature of this control begins to emerge. What was once a society of free markets and opportunities to prosper has now transformed into a society where access to prosperity depends on conformity. The digital system is not content with just controlling what you buy. It will control what you think, what you say, even what you dream. And with that, an invisible empire of financial and political power will emerge, an empire that will be practically impossible to challenge. Resistance to it will be seen not just as a revolt against the financial system, but as a threat to the established global order. In this scenario, the words of Revelation 13:17 gain new relevance, and no one could buy or sell except he who had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. The digital currency system, as a tool of control, will begin to become the marker that defines who can live and who will be marginalized. Financial freedom, this fundamental right of every human being, will be replaced by submission to a system that controls every aspect of life. And when that happens, the real battle for freedom will begin. Will it be possible to resist? Or will it be that, as written in the prophecies, everyone will be forced to bow down to the beast? The financial future of humanity is not just a question of numbers, but a question of survival, where the price of freedom will be the highest of all. The Great Control. total surveillance, and the end of privacy. In a world that is taking great strides towards technology, privacy, which was once a fundamental human right, begins to dissipate, like a fog that dissipates at dawn. The promise of a safer, more connected society soon reveals itself like a glass trap, shiny and tempting at first glance, but capable of trapping all who fall into it. The great control, more than a simple search for data, is the imposition of an invisible regime, which observes, analyzes, and decides every movement of the human being. The all-seeing eye, instead of being a religious metaphor, is now a technological reality, operated by omnipresent cameras, devices that listen at all times, and algorithms that know more about you than you know yourself. Privacy, this concept that for centuries was considered a pillar of freedom, is on the verge of being extinct. Imagine a world where, when you leave home, your every step is recorded, where, when speaking, your dialogues are no longer just heard, but stored and analyzed for patterns, for behaviors that could be labeled as deviant or undesirable. Imagine, too, that every transaction you make, every click on the internet, every movement of your bank account is tracked, not to protect your security, but to ensure your compliance. The total surveillance system is not limited to just monitoring public spaces, but infiltrates your personal life. It becomes part of your daily life. As you seek to hide, you find yourself constantly exposed, not by intruders, but by a system that was designed to ensure that no one escapes. The Antichrist, in his rise, will no longer need an army to control the population. He won't need soldiers scattered across the streets patrolling every corner. Instead, it will rely on the collaboration of the population itself, who, through their personal devices, will become the key piece of this immense and relentless surveillance system. You will not be forced to submit to control. You will be moved to embrace it. Applications, social networks, shopping platforms, all these tools, which previously seemed harmless, have now become monitoring mechanisms. Every like, every search, every word typed feeds an immense database that every day becomes more accurate and more efficient in predicting your behaviors. What started as a choice will turn into a prison without bars. The idea that privacy is an illusion seems distant, but as control increases, this illusion dissolves. The scariest thing of all is that, over time, you start to believe that you have nothing left to hide. You begin to silently accept that your life must be transparent, because at the end of the day, you have nothing to fear. But that is the big mistake. The price of transparency is the loss of freedom, and the loss of freedom is the path to slavery. Total surveillance is not limited to simple monitoring, but to a complete reconfiguration of society. What were once private spaces, like your home, your conversations, your thoughts, now become public, transformed into data that can be sold, analyzed, or even manipulated to shape your behavior. The greatest irony in all of this is that surveillance, which is promoted as a security mechanism, actually serves to create an environment of constant fear and conformity. Big Brother, once a dystopian science fiction concept, is now a concrete and relentless power. The fear of being monitored, of being observed, is enough for people to remain silent, to conform, to adapt. And this is how control begins to creep in, slowly but irreversibly. Freedom of expression, which was a hallmark of open societies, is the next victim. Those who dare to question the system are easily silenced, either by social pressure or fear of reprisals. In a world where everything is watched, even the words you say become suspect. This is the true end of privacy, not the end of privacy as an abstract concept, but the end of privacy as an essential right, a right that is devoured by the insidious presence of surveillance. True human freedom is not just the freedom to move, but the freedom to be, to think, to speak without fear of reprisal. When privacy is destroyed, an individual's identity is also diluted. You are no longer a person, but a set of data, a statistic, a behavior to be shaped. There is no longer freedom to choose what to share and what to hide, because everything is observed, everything is known, everything is controlled. As the world moves toward this total surveillance, one question remains: how willing are we to surrender our freedom? What are we willing to sacrifice for a false sense of security? The surveillance system being implemented is not just a matter of physical control, but of control of the mind, of the soul. The Antichrist, through this system, will not only observe your actions, but will control your reactions, your thoughts, your emotions. The last refuge of your freedom will be your own mind. But to what extent will it remain untouched in a world where nothing escapes the gaze of those who observe? The end of faith, spiritual collapse, and the emergence of the new global religion. As the world plunges into a whirlwind of change, one of the most profound and dangerous transformations is the collapse of the beliefs that have sustained humanity for millennia. What seemed to be the pillar of society, faith in something greater, in a higher force that guided human beings, begins to disintegrate, replaced by a spiritual vacuum that is quickly filled by something new, but also frightening. The emergence of a new global religion, tailor-made for a world controlled by technology and the incessant quest for power, marks a point of no return. What was an individual spiritual path with its unique beliefs and traditions has now become a unified system, a faith imposed on everyone, with no room for questioning. The true essence of religion, the connection with the divine, is sacrificed in the name of absolute control. This new religion is not based on spirituality or any transcendent connection, but on worship of the system that controls every aspect of human life. The Antichrist, the leader of this new faith, no longer needs altars or temples. He creates a religion of convenience, adapted to the needs of an increasingly technological world, where faith is determined by the ability to adapt to the system. Instead of praying or seeking salvation in something beyond this world, people are told to trust the algorithms, artificial intelligence systems, financial and control structures that ensure their security and prosperity. The belief is no longer in God, but in the idea that the system, in all its technological perfection, is the true force that governs the universe. The irony, however, is profound. As more and more people abandon their traditional beliefs, believing that science and reason are enough to guide them, the void left by this lost faith begins to be filled by a new obsession, the worship of power, efficiency, and the absolute truth of the system. Faith is not lost completely. It just changes form, transforming into a blind devotion to a digital future where machines not only rule, but also determine the value and meaning of every human life. Religion, which once offered solace and hope to millions, is now replaced by devotion to control, where the only absolute truth is that imposed by the centralized system. What was once a path to salvation and purpose is now a journey of submission and conformity. And where does this leave us? The answer may be more alarming than we imagine. As this new global religion grows, true faith begins to be demonized. Those who still believe in spiritual teachings in ancient traditions are labeled as reactionaries, outdated, or even threats to order. Tolerance, which should be the basis of a plural society, turns into a monster of intolerance. There is no longer room for diversity of thought or religious freedom. Everyone must align with the new system. Spirituality, the true search for divine truth, begins to be seen as a form of rebellion. Faith, in its essence, becomes a subversive act, something to be eradicated in the name of the New World Order. The breaking point between the old and the new, between true faith and the worship of the system, begins to become increasingly clear. The prophecies speak of a time when false prophets will take the stage, offering promises of salvation through artificial means, using fear and control as their tools. They do not come with grand religious speeches, but with promises of a better life, of a perfect world, where humanity will finally reach its peak, but only if it submits to the system. They will sell us the idea that through our total adherence to the new faith, we can achieve utopia, a society free from conflict, poverty, and suffering. But the price will be our own humanity. The most terrifying thing is that, over time, individuals will no longer realize what was lost. They will become accustomed to the idea that control is necessary for peace, that obedience to the system is the only path to salvation. True faith, the faith that connected people to the divine, will be forgotten, left behind, like a relic of an ancient time. Churches and temples will be replaced by centers of system worship, places where individuals will no longer pray not to God, but to the machine, to the central authority that promises to guarantee their safety and their place in the new world. And those who refuse to bow to this new faith will be excluded, marginalized, even silenced. In this new scenario, the Antichrist no longer needs to be a figure with supernatural powers. He is the system. Religion will no longer be a spiritual quest, but a search for acceptance within a highly controlled society. The end of true faith will not be a dramatic event, but a slow erosion, where every bit of spiritual freedom will be replaced by blind obedience to the system, and so the great deception will be accomplished. Humanity will be convinced that by abandoning its beliefs in God and embracing the new system, it has finally found true freedom. The spiritual apocalypse will be invisible but devastating, because in the search for security and order, humanity will have lost what made it truly free: its faith. Wow, you can feel the weight of what's to come, right? The apocalypse is not just a distant story, it is knocking on the door. And the most impressive thing is that what the Bible already predicted is happening right in front of us. But don't worry, because there is a solution. Now, if you found all this shocking, imagine what's coming in the next video. It's going to be even more bombastic. So if you don't want to miss anything, sign up, activate the bell, and of course, leave a like to show that you're connected. Let's understand together what the future holds for us. Until the next video, it's going to be chilling.